From 1914 to 1918, nations were torn apart by the First World War. While nations wreaked havoc upon each other, America endeavored to maintain peace and neutrality. Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States during World War I, encouraged Americans to remain steadfast against the onslaught of war by proclaiming, quote, "There's no such thing as a man being too proud to fight." However, worsening American-German relations and the destruction of 7 American merchant ships effectively ended Wilson's diplomatic relations with Germany and caused Congress to declare war on Germany. Even so, Wilson, who was continuously searching for a peaceful resolution, presented his peace program to the Congress in 1917. Although it was rejected, Wilson was able to impose his idea when the war ended on November 11, 1918. On that day, Wilson suggested that his peace program, also known as the 14 Points, would set the guidelines for treaties, freedom of seas, and all other disputes in general. The 14th point stated, quote, "A general association of nations must be formed under specific covenants for the purpose of affording mutual guarantees of political independence and territorial integrity to great and small states alike." The formation of such an association began with the Paris Peace Conference of 1919. President Wilson headed the U.S. delegation to the conference in order to present his concept of a League of Nations.
The idea of the League of Nations that he comes up with is collective security. We will all take care of each other, and we will negotiate rather than go to war.
Although colonial powers were not enchanted by Wilson's idea of a diplomatic League of Nations, the Peace Conference accepted Wilson's proposal and incorporated the League of Nations into the Treaty of Versailles. As a result, on April 11, 1919, the League of Nations was formed to prevent war from ever breaking out again. Wilson's struggle to form the League of Nations was incomparable with his struggle to get the League ratified by Congress. After his return to America, Wilson proposed the Treaty of Versailles to the Senate. Some senators supported the League because it limited war and defended democracy, but opposition quickly arose. At the time, the U.S. followed an isolationist policy in which the needs and rights of the people were placed above everything else. Since the League of Nations put the collective interests of countries over the interests of Americans, many isolationists opposed the ratification of the treaty. The Senate debated the issue for 4 months until they reached their decision.
The U.S. Senate and House refused to ratify. So it starts weak.
This, however, was not the only absence in the League. Germany was not initially allowed to join as punishment for their role in the First World War. Moreover, the USSR was rejected because of its communist government, which was frowned upon by the League.
Bit by bit, Germany and Russia come in, but the U.S. never does.
This was not the League's only weakness, however. The League of Nations had 3 sanctions to achieve its purpose. First, conflicts would be discussed in a peaceful, orderly manner, and a verbal warning would be issued to any offending country. If this did not work, the League would employ economic sanctions by boycotting the opposing country into near bankruptcy. If all else failed, the League would turn to physical sanctions. This would involve utilizing a military force that the League did not actually have. None of the countries in the League were able to provide for such a military force, and any country opposing the League would be sure to know of this weakness. Although the League was impaired by these weaknesses, it was successful in preventing war on several occasions. In 1921, Finland and Sweden contested over the Åland Islands, which are equidistant from each country. Although the land had traditionally been Finnish, many civilians preferred the Swedish government. Finland and Sweden approached the League of Nations with the request to resolve the issue. The League ultimately decided that the islands would stay with Finland and forbade weaponry on the islands. This agreement has been upheld by both countries to this very day. In 1923, the League was confronted with a problem that involved their land. The Treaty of Versailles had given the League ownership of Memel, a port in Lithuania. However, Lithuanians violently invaded the port in protest. The League resolved this issue by conceding land surrounding the port to Lithuania. The port itself was declared to be international land. The League's greatest success was its advocacy for improved health conditions in Turkey. Doctors from the health organization were sent by the League to improve the quality of life for 1.4 million displaced people in Turkey. Thanks to the actions of the League, doctors were able to check the spread of typhoid and cholera in Turkey. In addition, the League rebuilt farms and homes and financed supplies to create jobs in Turkey. As a result, 600,000 jobs were created. The League's work in Turkey, which a member of the League referred to as, quote, the greatest work of mercy which mankind has undertaken, made way for the League's future campaigns against disease and for the improvement of life in third world countries.
Humanitarianism does get a huge boost from the foundation of the League of Nations.
Even though the League had its successes, its many weaknesses contributed to its failures. Soon after the formation of the League, conflict arose in Teschen, a small town between Poland and Czechoslovakia. Both countries claimed Teschen for its plethora of coal mines. The League's attempt to give the coal mine-rich suburb of Teschen to Czechoslovakia was rejected by Poland, and the two countries would contest the issue for the next 20 years. Not long after the conflict in Teschen, Italian nationalists captured the port of Fiume, which belonged to Yugoslavia at the time. For longer than a year, D'Annunzio, an Italian nationalist, ruled over the port. The conflict only concluded when Italy attacked the port in response to D'Annunzio's growing popularity. All the while, the League stood by and was unable to prevent the bloodshed caused by the conflict in the port of Fiume. None of these failures could compete with the League's greatest failure, which would lead to the eventual disbandment of the League.
As things begin to heat up in the 20s and 30s, the real problem with the League of Nations begins to appear. Anybody who was miffed at how their particular negotiations had gone bailed out.
In 1931, Japan, which was hit hard with the effects of the Depression, invaded mineral-rich Manchuria, located in China. China appealed to the League of Nations for help, but the League's verbal warning and economic sanctions against Japan only resulted in Japan's split from the League. Not long after, in 1933, Italy and the rapidly growing Nazi Germany withdrew from the League. 2 years later, Italy invaded Ethiopia, then known as Abyssinia, but the League's economic sanctions were unable to resolve this conflict as well. These fiascos, along with the ascent of Adolf Hitler to power in Germany, led to the League's most tragic failures: World War II and the Holocaust. The League failed in its primary goals of maintaining peace. Throughout the war, the League held no power and was essentially ignored by its members due to their preoccupation with the Second World War. However, the League's greatest failure led to its greatest success. In 1945, the League was replaced by the United Nations, which works to achieve the goals that the League once strived for. The UN has continued the legacy of the League with its unparalleled humanitarian relief. More significantly, the United Nations has hitherto been successful in preventing a catastrophic world war. The UN website states, quote, "The forerunner of the United Nations was the League of Nations, an organization established to promote international cooperation and to achieve peace and security. The League of Nations ceased its activities after failing to prevent the Second World War." Although the League of Nations ultimately failed, it succeeded in providing diplomatic solutions to world disputes, and consequently, it set the standard for its successor, the United Nations. As President Woodrow Wilson once said, quote, "What we demand is that the world be made fit and safe to live in. All the peoples of the world are in effect partners in this interest, and for our own part, we see very clearly that unless justice be done to others, it will not be done to us. The League of Nations has done justice unto the world."